Hey, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm very sorry, it has been a while. I think it's been over a year since I posted my last video. Definitely not the length of break that I intended to take, but thank you if you stuck around. And if you're new here, I'm Sophie. I'm the founder of Agnes Studio, and today I'm making another pair of Harlene Dungarees. Some of you may have found my channel already because last year I made a pair of green cord ones. So if you haven't checked out that video, you can go and check it out. It might be slightly different to this one. My last pair I made in the size 14 because I was pregnant. I am going to make a pair size 12 today. See how the sizing compares. I thought that the 14 was quite big for a size 14. So I have got the pattern, which I had already from Merchant and Mills. Obviously, the more times I make these dungarees, I feel like my cost per use of the pattern is going down, therefore making it more cost effective to make my own clothes. Also brought 2 sets of hardware kits, again from Merchant and Mills. These, I think they only do them in the gunmetal colour, so those are the ones I brought. They've got 2 sliders, 2 clips and 6 jeans buttons in there. I've brought some Scan Fill organic cotton thread. I really like when you get like cream denim and then have contrast colour thread. So I was either going to go for navy or I was going to go for like a browny gold. I've brought this fabric from Merchant and Mills. I will pop the exact fabric details down here and in the description below because I can't exactly remember what it is. But if you see, it's this really nice cream colour. It's got this nice twill effect to it. I brought 4 meters of this because I'm making 2 lots of dungarees. Enough of me babbling on. Let's get into the video. So to begin with, if you've not used a wrought pattern before, you might not be aware, but the pattern comes like this on a very large sheet of tracing paper, and there's 3 of these sheets in this pattern. If you can see, it comes with all the sizes on. So this one goes up to 6 to 18, and I think maybe on their website they do bigger sizes on Merchant and Mills. So what I've done in the past, and I think when I made the Otterline jacket, I just cut out the size that I wanted. However, I then can't make another size in the future if I want to. So what I did for this pattern is I've traced off the size I want using dot and cross pattern paper, transferring all the like pattern marks and markings over to my traced pattern as well. So to start with, I'm just going to trace all the pattern pieces off, and then I'll lay out my fabric and cut my fabric. Also, let me show you one thing that the Merchant and Mills patterns do really well is they come with a set of instructions which are really easy to follow. So here is some of the pattern that I've already traced. So far I've done all the smaller parts and I just need to do the trouser legs as well. They were quite a bit longer, so I was running out of space. And then I'll cut them out with my paper scissors. So I've tried to transfer all the information over to the pattern and also crucially write the size on it. Before I cut out the pattern and just lay out all my pieces on my fabric to make sure that I've got space for them all and find the most like economical way to fit them all on. So next I'll pin them all down and then cut them out. Okay, I've finally cut all my pieces out, so now it's time to start sewing. Okay, so the first step is to do the top stitching on the bib pocket. So I'm going to make sure that I've transferred all my notches over because that will help me keep my stitching straight. If you make a mistake on your top stitching, obviously that's the most obvious part of the dungarees because they're literally like front and center. So I measured my top stitching carefully, and here I'm just folding over the top of the pockets and stitching them down. And sewing both sides of the front bib together. This pattern uses a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, and certain steps involve trimming a little bit of that seam allowance down, which is what I'm just doing here. And all seams in these dungarees I'm going to finish with overlocking. When I made my last set of dungarees, I just used zigzag stitch and this wasn't quite effective enough. I am overlocking every step as I go and also pressing where necessary. So here I'm pre-pressing the pockets, the seam allowance, the pockets over, ready to stitched on. This dungaree requires a lot of top stitching, so most of this I'm doing Most of the top stitching you'll see, I'm just doing 2 rows of top stitching like a centimetre apart, having pressed the seams over to one side. For step number 5, I've lined the pocket up to the centre of the seam and I'm just stitching the pocket onto the front bib. Step number 6 is also a little bit fiddly because that involves doing the last 2 rows of top stitching onto the pocket, so you have to measure them quite carefully. Other than the top stitching, I feel like this pattern is quite straightforward. It is marked as skill level intermediate, but I think if you have some experience of making your own clothes, then you should find this quite straightforward. So when it comes to top stitching, rather than back stitching at the end of each row, I'm leaving the threads long and pulling them through to the back and then tying them so you don't see any extra stitching seams on the front. Now for the back dart, so I've already made my mark as to where the dart will end, so I'm just stitching in the dart, marking it with a pin, matching the pocket up to the notches and sewing the back pockets onto the trouser legs. So I'm just going nice and close round to the edge of the pocket, and then I'm going back round about a foot width in from the edge, and I'll do this on both the back pockets as well. Okay, so we are now going to do steps 9 to 21, starting on the trousers, so starting with the false fly all the way through to the pockets before we attach the bib. I have done one of them already, so I've got the bib attached, I've got the fly, and we've got the pockets on. I don't know if you can spot the mistake I've made here, but I've stitched this seam the wrong way. These are meant to line up because I stitched this one, I pressed this seam to the wrong side and stitched it to the wrong side. So on my next set, I'm going to have to do the fly on the wrong side so the fly matches this one. And this is the finished look with the false fly and with the pocket stitched back like that. So we're going to need piece number 11, which is the false fly. We're going to need the pocket bag and the pocket back. I think that's the pocket bag. And this big one is the pocket bag, and then our front trouser pieces. To start the front fly, I'm just going to overlock the edge of the fly piece and stitch that down to the wrong side of the trouser leg and trim the seam allowance down a bit as well. Because this is quite a thick twill fabric, by trimming the seam allowance it means you get less bulky seams when you've got all the layers of fabric together. And now I'm just top stitching around the edge of the fly just to give that false fly effect, and stitching the crotch seams together as well now. The front of the dungarees are really starting to come together. Now I'm top stitching the front seam, just coming up about a centimetre past the edge of the front fly, like that. And now attaching the pocket bags. So I stitch all the way around the edge of the pocket bag back and the pocket bags so they're all stitched down. And then with the right sides together, I'm going to stitch the pocket bag to the front leg of the dungarees. And then I'm going to French seam to finish off the pocket bag. That's just going to give a nice clean finish to the bottom of the pocket bag. So there I've just top stitched the edge of the pocket, and then I'm going to just stitch the pocket into place behind the front of the trouser panel. I think the first time I did this I thought this step was more complicated than it was, but definitely coming to make my second and then third pair of these dungarees it made a lot more sense. So yeah, once I've stitched the pocket down, and you'll find that the pocket sits quite naturally wants to sit flat against the front of the trousers. Once you've stitched those down, then the buttonhole extensions also fold behind. So you stitch them back as well. And then we're actually going to attach our bib. I feel like when you start to attach the bib to the trousers in this pattern, it really feels like the dungarees are coming together and you can actually see what they're going to look like. So it's quite exciting. So yeah, I'm just stitching the top bib to the front of the trousers at the moment, going up to the tacks, the marks that I've notched in the pattern, and then attaching the front waistband facing. So I've already pressed one side of that up, and then I'm just stitching the sides and the top down to, this is much clearer on the instructions. Like I said before, these instructions are really easy to follow. So now we're going to top stitch the front facing waistband back down. There's a lot of switching between your top stitching thread and your like matching colour thread in this pattern as well. So if you had 2 machines or 2 bobbins, it might be a good idea to have a couple wound up ready to go, just to save you time on switching between those threads. So this is step number 25, and we're top stitching the edge of the front bib as well. I've already pressed the seam allowances over, so now I'm just doing 2 rows of top stitching up those sides. I also had to do a stay stitch as well, which should stop it stretching too much. So there we go, there's the bib. I'm really happy with how it looks with the contrast stitching. And now on to the back trousers. So from steps 26 onwards, so again using a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance and attaching the pocket hole extensions to the side of the trousers. As you can see, I've already overlocked the side seams on the trouser legs. This is because once I've sewn the trousers up, it won't be as easy to get back in to overlock them. And now I'm starting on the back bib, ready for the back straps. Doing 2 layers of top stitching down that back crotch seam. And this is the back bib, so I'm just doing the 2 layers of top stitching, and I also need to do some stay stitching at the top of the V, which will help when I come to attach the straps. Just jumping in here to say that I have been editing this video for several days now. It started off as 3 hours long, and I've decided that I'm going to split it into a 2-parter. So I will release part 2 next week, so you can come back and watch the second part where I will finish making these dungarees. So I hope you have enjoyed the video so far. Give me a thumbs up if you have, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss it when I release the next video, and let me know in the comments what you thought. Thank you so much for sticking with me so far, and yeah, I'll get part 2 to you next week. Thank you.